Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of His Dark Materials. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we're picking up pretty much after the aftermath of the season 1 finale. Obviously, Lyra's in this other world. And obviously, Pan keeps trying to convince her to use the alethiometer, to, get answers. But obviously, she's super reluctant to use it after what went down with Roger. And she's explaining it later on because it's like, yes, the alethiometer tells you the truth, but it doesn't tell you everything. Because I think it's a situation where it's like you have to be very specific about what you ask it. Because it's one of those things, it'll give you the answer to what you want, And even then, I think that's also in itself an interesting thing because it's like, the truth is not an easy pill to swallow. So it is a situation where it's like you because Lyra's still, I think, what you still consider kind of a child. So learning that at such a young age of kind of like the ugly truths of certain situations, like I think that's kind of what the alethiometer kind of does. It's very blunt. There's no tact to it type of situation. It tells you a truth that you might not want, but it's there. But once again, you have to ask these very specific questions. It's also interesting because obviously the alethiometer is also it's up to interpretation, but even obviously Lyra is a lot better at interpreting it than obviously some people in the magisterium are. But nevertheless, lo and behold, she runs into Will. I wasn't expecting to run into be this quickly, but obviously they're in this city. There's no one else there, and they meet each other. But he also run into other kids, and I was like, I thought this entire city was going to be completely empty. But it turns out, like, the adults ran away because these beings known as specters come after people. But you can only see them if you're an adult, which it seems like, Will is on his way. So, it's saying at the very least he's closer to it. Because it's like, Lyra, you're still a girl, whereas Will's on the cusp of becoming, like, a man, I guess, from boy to man in that sense. So, and it was interesting the moment they were like basically the specters rip you inside out. At first, I thought it was more of a literal sense, and it's more of a figurative sense, in sense that they take away everything that make kind of almost probably like your soul. Just because they run into a guy later on, and he just seemed hollow, like his very essence was taken from him. He just seemed like he was like a shell on autopilot. And I think that, it's kind of what they kind of take your essence and everything. So it is really interesting too, the breakdown, just everything between Will and Lyra, just like obviously the differences of the worlds are from, because obviously it's a parallel world thing where things are similar while things are different. I don't know if I made this comparison last season. It definitely came to my mind this episode. I might have said this last season, so sorry for repeating myself. But it definitely reminds me of Full Metal Alchemist in that regard. Spoilers for Full Metal Alchemist, the original anime at the very least. Like when Ed ends up in that parallel universe, that parallel world he's in during the first like Full Metal Alchemist movie, like that. Wasn't it anything called like The Conquerors of Shambhala? Isn't that, I'm blanking on the title. But basically during that movie, he ends up in a parallel world to his where alchemy doesn't exist. So it's kind of that same thing, because obviously it's a little, like obviously magic and everything is real and existent. Lyra's world doesn't exist in his, and obviously like it's kind of like I guess steampunk might be like the aesthetic that, Lyra's world has, whereas Will's world is very modern. It's a reflection of our world. It's closer to what our world is, essentially. So, but obviously it's a little, like, differences because he's like, well, you have a demon, because obviously for him it's like demons kind of mean something evil, and Pan's like, thanks? But I think for her, it's like she's kind of reluctant to trust anyone because it's like, well, the last person she got close to, Roger, died. Maybe she's worried that, like, kind of maybe history might repeat itself. But also, like, there's so many people she's trusted that have screwed her over. She trusted Azrael. He screwed her over. Killed her best friend. Her mom isn't who, Miss Coulter isn't who she thought she was. Finding out that she was your mom, but also just everything else about her, So you would definitely have a little bit of trust issues, but obviously Will's like, hey, let's stick together, all three of us kind of search this place out. And so obviously I even love at one point in time he's like, yeah, this is where I'm living. And because he's like, oh, we should stick together. And she's like, okay, and stays at his place. He's like, well, I didn't mean for you to literally, he's like, you're moving at like 100 miles per hour. It's like, first you attack me, then you run away from me, now you want to live. It's like, there's plenty of empty houses that you can make that aren't yours. And it's like, she takes his bed and everything, and he's just like, I'll find somewhere to sleep downstairs. He made her an omelet. It was just, it's kind of adorable, like, the friendship they're building. I even love later on, she tries to make an omelet too. Essentially, she basically made an omelet, but it looked more like scrambled eggs. And obviously, it's like, you can hear what she's eating. You can hear the crunch of the shells that she left in there. But it was adorable, like, her trying to make it. She's like, see, you taught me, so I made it. And it's just like, he's like, well, it looks like you kind of put your special, spin on it. I thought that was kind of adorable. What I also thought was kind of interesting is that the kids kind of, well, for one, we see that obviously it's just not just, was it Angelica and like her sister? It's not just them. There are other kids, like probably every other kid that's there. They mentioned one kid's name, but then Angelica looked at her sister almost like, shut up, don't talk about that. I guess that's someone that was slightly older, kind of very probably close to Will in the sense of like, probably about the same age and probably got attacked by the Spectre. So that's probably like an example of yeah. It's actually interesting. I guess maybe this is the parallel. I was like, there's something that this reminds me of, and it's probably like, oh yeah, Neverland, the whole Peter Pan thing, never wanting to grow up. In this sense, it's like, oh, you don't want to grow up because if you grow up, you're going to get attacked by these specters. So there's that whole, situation. But they ended up attacking that cat because I guess they don't have any animals in their world like that. Maybe, I don't know. Because obviously it's like, Pan came out to protect, because it was like, maybe Pan should stay hidden because obviously they don't have demons here either. There was actually this line from Lyra that I thought was kind of interesting, where she was like, she basically was saying like, I don't see your demon yet, but I think I will. Because obviously demons are a part of you. They're kind of like an extension of your soul. They're a part of you. And I think for her, she's like, you're a good person, that you're going to have like she's like, I kind of see like what kind of demon you would have, I think. And so it makes you wonder, would Will ever eventually get a demon, or would he not, because it's obviously not an age thing, because obviously adults in her world have, demons, but maybe it's a thing of, maybe if he ended up going to her world, maybe he would birth the demon in that moment. Maybe it takes going into a world, because obviously there's the whole question about dust and everything too. So it's like, maybe being around, maybe being around it would have, awaken, a demon in him. Maybe not. It is nice that he ended up finding that cat, because that cat did lead him there. And part of me was like, I was about to say, like, you don't think it can't, because it doesn't talk in one. I mean, it could be like a special case, but it's just like, it's probably just like maybe there's more to the cat. Probably not. It's just like, hey, that's an animal that led me here, and it's just like, hey, I want to take care of it, look after it, There's also the big question of, where is Azrael? Because, like, obviously he's not in this world anymore, which is, because that's the whole thing. It's like, this is the world he was looking at, because this is the city that was in the sky. And it's like, if he's not here anymore, because obviously, like, he wanted to go to this place for a specific reason. Maybe it was just a jump off point. Maybe like, I need to get here so I can get to here, Does he even have the means to control how he even gets to other worlds? I don't think he does, because obviously that's going to be something, just based on the trailers, we know that that's going to be something that Will and Lyra end up finding, like that knife that lets you do that. But does he have something already that lets, like, you'd have to find an already existing window to cross into a different world. But like, either he's still in that same world, he's just in a different place right now, he already left the city, or he already jumped to another world, because obviously the trailers didn't show him at all. So it begs the question, like, what that's all about, like, whether he already found what he wanted to in this world, or what, like I said, was there even a purpose to come to this world other than it being a jumping off point, or was it like, no, getting here was the first step because I needed something here before I go on to another place? Or maybe he found what he was looking for. They didn't say anything about running an Azure, so either he avoided them, or because you think if Lyra landed in this world, he had to have landed here too. Nevertheless, all the while that's happening, obviously the Magisterium is like, its armies outside looking at, oh my god, this pillar of light. and then it was like the Cardinal is kind of denying all of it because they have to, because it's the thing, if you acknowledge like other worlds exist, it threatens their power and their authority. So he's all about, the Cardinal's kind of like, but one of the fathers is like, no, we should investigate this because, you know, he's a lot more open to it, but I think some of the hierarchy are probably kind of old school in the sense of like, no, this threatens our power and authority. We don't need to investigate. We actually need to shut it down. We need to block that hole so no one finds it. I mean, to be fair, that's also very like old school thinking in the world. I mean, I would say even in our world, it's like, you know, people who thought outside the box, who kind of, you know, once again, people believe the world to be the center, that Earth was the center of the universe at one point in time. But it's like, you know, and if you thought otherwise, you're a heretic, you know. You were, you know, thought of something else, you know, thought as something else. So it's kind of in that same vein. And obviously, you know, you have Coulter torturing that witch. And it's like, oh yeah, it said that these give you the ability to fly. And she's slowly like pulling them out of that witch, Katya. And then obviously there's Lee meeting up with Serafina. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you something that will help, you know, lead you to where you, like, when you need to be around, when you get to Lyra and she needs protection, like, this will help. Because obviously he's trying to find the guy that, it's basically, he's trying to find Will's dad. But then there's a whole, you know, obviously like that other witch showed up asking for Serafina's help. And I thought it was interesting the back and forth between their demons, because it's like, no, we need to focus, like Serafina's demon's like, no, we need to focus on Lyra. That's what's important right now. But then like the other demon was like, the prophecy is one thing, it's not everything. Because it's like Serafina's so focused on the prophecy, it's like you're not focusing on everything else that's going down right now. It's kind of the whole point. It's like your indifference, you know, we'll go to this witch with or without you, the one that's been, you know, Katya, that's been caught by the Magisterium, just because, you know, you're letting so much other stuff fall to the wayside. Like, you're not willing to battle against the Magisterium because they've cracked down more on everyone else, everywhere else, you know, because, you know, and it's like you're not willing to stand up, because she was like, sister, join me in this battle against them, you know. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That witch went off to go try and rescue Katya, who tells Coulter a little bit that obviously it's about the prophecy, it's about Lyra, that she goes by a different name, and obviously like Coulter's like, what do you know about Lyra, you know? And so before she could say anything, like, it's like she called out to the other witch, and it's her familiar, the other witch's familiar, a demon was kind of like, she's calling for death. And once again, I just like the way the witches operate, just like the whole, like, how they like kind of like phase into like particles like that. I think that's such a dope aspect. Like, also, but like she just pops in, kills her friend to kind of, you know, free her from being tortured, and ends up attacking the Cardinal, which immediately Coulter, being who she is, manipulates the situation, because the other father's like, hey, we need to land, and she's like, or we can let this play out. If he survives, oh, it's meant to be. If not, that's also meant to be. We need someone who can lead, you know, someone who's willing to turn down a glass of wine, you know. And it's like, even he's like, why would you do that? She's like, I will be the one to commit the sin, because basically she even kind of admits it. It's like, yeah, because with you in a powerful position, I can do what I want. It's like, what is that? It's kind of basically, it's no your concern of yours, but I will commit this sin for you. And it's like, well, because I guess she figures he's a lot easier to manipulate. It leaves her open to be able to do it. Like, yes, he's distrustful of her, but it's like, if she helps him be in a powerful position, then he'll kind of be a little more, give her a little more leeway, kind of won't keep her as restrained, and she'll be able to do what she wants to. And obviously this is all connected to Lyra, because let's not forget, she also lied. She's like, oh yeah, I never made it to Azrael. It's like, we know you did. It's like, what did you talk to Azrael about? I don't know. I didn't make it to him. It's like, that's BS, you know? So obviously this is about Lyra, and she doesn't, once again, wants to keep her situation, you know, concealed about that. But going back to Lyra and Will, there's a whole situation of both of them finding, wait, there's an Oxford in your world? It's like, yeah, there's an Oxford in mine. And it's like, well, if she can't get answers in her world, maybe she can get answers in his Oxford. But for him, it's like, going back to my Oxford is kind of dangerous. But there are things he wants to check up on. In particular, you know, his mom and everything. But at the same time, it's the situation of obviously Lyra's in the same boat. I can't go back to my Oxford either, so, but she's asking Will for help, and Will's willing to help. It's like, well, we'll move out tomorrow. And it's kind of interesting because both of them have secrets. She has the alethiometer, and he has the letters from his dad, and he's kind of cracking those open. And at the same time, Lyra asks the alethiometer about Will, and it's like, oh, he's a murderer. And Pan's like, a murderer? It's like, yeah, but a good one, like Yorick. So it's like trying to put in perspective, like, oh, like he's not someone that kills out of like malice. It's out of, protection of himself as well as other people. So like, that he carries that, but it's more so like, but it's also saying that he's connected to this place, that he has something he's supposed to do here, and so are we. And at the very end of the episode, last thing we see is a specter coming after him. So it's definitely going to be interesting to find out more about, maybe about this world. Also, like what these specters are, why they are going after adults, why adults and not children. Maybe there's a metaphor there, because like someone last season had hit me up to kind of make comparisons about like certain things about the Magisterium, like maybe it's supposed to be like a metaphor for something, kind of like how X-Men are a metaphor for racism, which I never knew that as a kid growing up. Like, it's not until I got older that I was like, oh, I can see the parallels, because I heard someone mention that, and in retrospect I was like, okay, I can definitely see the parallels. Maybe it's kind of similar to that. Maybe there are parallels that the original book was written in comparison, or maybe even maybe this adaptation kind of leans into certain not leans into, but is representative of certain metaphors that I won't get too much into it, but it was just kind of an interesting thing that part of me was wondering, like, these specters coming after kids. I mean, going after adults rather than kids, like, makes you wonder like what that's about. But I'm very glad to have his Dark Materials back. I'm very interested to see all that goes down this season. Just from what we saw from the trailer, this season looks like it's going to be wild. So I can't wait to kind of get into the ins and outs of everything that this season has in store for us. So I'm really interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.